Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers defeat the Florida Panthers 5-3, and it is their first multi-goal comeback victory of the season in the first game that they're eliminated in. So through 80 games, didn't do it once, and the only time they even picked up a point when losing by 2 goals was the home opener, the second game of the season. Well, in the penultimate game of the season, they are able to get the victory, trailing 3-1 to the Florida Panthers, who were still had some hopes of uh, getting home ice advantage in their first round matchup. Um, this regulation loss by Florida ensures that they will not do that. They're locked into the #3 spot in the Atlantic Division. The Rangers are able to get the comeback. They get 2 late goals in the second, couple goals in the third, and they win 5-3. And I was actually at this game, and my preference would have been for the Rangers to lose. I mean, look, it's not as if it's a massive deal one way or another, but really, if you can improve that draft position, and there's a couple other factors as well. But this win combined with the potential Lightning, if the Rangers beat the Lightning on Thursday, it kind of puts them in a spot where really you have to think long and hard about just giving Pittsburgh the pick this year and keeping your pick next year. I do think that, it's going to be a tough decision. Right now, the Rangers can finish anywhere from 10 through 13. Um, and the other teams in the mix are Detroit, the Islanders, and Columbus, as far as the ones that can move around. But um, with the Lightning, their incentive, as I'm recording this, is to potentially win the Atlantic Division. It's a bit of a long shot. They're 4 points behind Toronto, and tomorrow, both Toronto and Tampa Bay have games, and depending on how those games go, their game against the Rangers will either have the chance, with help, in the form of Toronto losing. Um, so we'll see if there's incentive on the Lightning's end there. If there isn't, expect a roster for the Lightning that isn't very recognizable. At least that's what I would think. And then therefore, Rangers would have a decent chance of winning that game. But as far as this one goes, Rangers lineup, there were some changes. Matthew Robertson makes his NHL debut. It was determined that Braden Schneider is out for the season, upper body injury. So that was really the only, and maybe we'll find out some more injuries that come about at the end of the season. That's certainly possible. But this one was clearly the most, um, I don't know. I guess they felt as if it was in his best interest to not play. So clearly he was dealing with something that if they had reached the playoffs, he probably would have played through. But look, I was even very critical of him in that Carolina game. I didn't think he was very good. I thought he was one of the worst players on the ice. And then you find out about this, and maybe there's some correlation there. But he was one of the few players that have played all 80 games. In fact, he was the only defenseman to have done so. So now I believe the only ones left that have played each game this year would be Mika Zibanejad, Will Cooley, Alexis Lafreniere, and the other one would be a forward as well. And is it Vincent Trocheck? Might be Vincent Trocheck. It is, which is pretty crazy for Trocheck, just considering the amount of injuries that we've seen him deal with. I mean, clearly he's playing with like a broken pinky that he might have sustained in the Four Nations tournament. But those are the four that, depending on what happens last game, may play all 82 games. But Jonathan Quick was in that. Like I said, Matthew Robertson makes his NHL debut, and that was a long time coming. He was a 2019 draft pick who has still been with the organization. He was called up a bunch of times this season, but just never found his way in. And they made sure to get him in there, and he held his own. He ended up actually partnering up with Adam Fox, which I think is a good thing. Put these players in a position to succeed and to see what that combination looks like. And it wasn't perfect. There was certainly some mistakes that I could tell you. My vantage point was different having been at this game. But Matthew Robertson, he'll probably, get a chance to make his Madison Square Garden debut, which I'm sure is something that he's been open to do. And look, I don't think he probably has much of a future with this team, but he's going to try to make the most of it at the end of the season here. And also, news that kind of came out yesterday was Calvin DeHaan's frustrations over not playing, and it kind of makes sense why he was frustrated. And he ended up putting out a statement on Twitter. The Rangers PR definitely got in front of that because Molly Walker was the one who I think reported it, and he was either going to the ice for practice or leaving the ice from practice. And basically he was like, "Hey, like, let's talk about like how my time has been." here, like it's fucked, and now I've been kind of sort of mistreated in terms of lack of playing time. And I understand his frustrations. The thing is too, like he really has been the number 8 defenseman. Zach Jones has been number 7. Um, and look, Carson Soucy, I think, has been playing way too much. And it's one of those things where once they made that Soucy trade, that coincided with DeHaan never playing again. He basically played, what was it, maybe 3 or so games, I believe, and did all right, partnering up with Zach Jones at the time. And he was, again, very frustrated. And I was looking for that to be more of a bigger, breakup day conversation, but it ends up being a situation where I feel like the Rangers got in front of this, and DeHaan was fairly politically correct in his statement and didn't have that many inflammatory things to say. But um, either way, Calvin DeHaan will not be back. I mean, I think it's safe to say that Calvin DeHaan will not be back next season. But as far as the defense concerned, Urho Vakanainen was a healthy scratch, so that third pair of Vakanainen and are both out, and so they stuck with Keandre Miller and Morgan, and like I said, Robertson with Fox, and then it was Zach Jones with Soucy. So just an interesting little thing there, where Soucy had been with Fox, and he, in essence, moves down to play with Zach Jones. I believe, and I don't know this for 100%. I would venture to guess that it was Zach Jones that probably played on his offside, since we've seen it before. Don't know if we've seen it with Soucy as a Ranger. So those are the defensive pairs. And then for the forwards, they end up playing Brennan Othman and Gabe Perreault, which we kind of knew was going to happen. But the interesting thing is, as far as the scratches were concerned, Sam Carrick was one of them. And with him having been eliminated, I guess I can understand that. Maybe I think it was deemed as a healthy scratch. But the one that I guess is a little bit more perplexing is Brett Berard. Because at this point in the season, they're making it a point to get some of these young guys in. Matthew Robertson, who kind of just certainly like jumped over DeHaan. And, you're getting in Othman, you're getting in Perreault, you're sitting out Carrick, who, like, what his role is. Like, you don't need to see him. But for some reason, Brett Berard's a scratch. So really, like, the Rangers, by and large, played this pretty straight up. It's not as if there were any big time names that were sat in this game, right? No Panarins or Trocheks or JT Millers sitting out in this one. Jonathan Quick was in goal, and figured that would be the case. I would think that the last game against Lightning, you think that would go to Igor. Crazier things have happened if they do decide to go to Quick again, considering that they are eliminated. But Quick did hold his own in this one. It wasn't pretty, but he was able to get the job done. Um, but for Florida, before we get into the ins and outs of this game, their lineup was a little bit different as well. Now, we already know that they're dealing with some injuries and suspensions in the form of Aaron Ekblad, who's been suspended, and he'll return pretty early on in the playoffs. But Matthew Tkachuk's been out ever since that Four Nations tournament. So we know that. But then also, who was in the Florida lineup was Sam Reinhart, Alex Barkov, Sam Bennett returning from injury, Dmitry Kulikov returning from injury. So they had some big names in there that had not been playing. On the flip side, though, they decided to sit a lot of key players as well. Former Ranger Nico Mikkola was out, as well as Anton Lundell. Lusterinen didn't play, Brad Marchand, Mackie Samoskevich. So, players that are legitimate guys and have key roles in the Florida team were not in there. So as much as, I think Florida would have liked to have gotten home ice with Rangers, even if they won this game, it was still going to be a tough task. But Sergei Bobrovsky was in net. So certainly the Florida lineup was more than good enough to beat the Rangers, but it did not happen on this night. And so let's discuss this one. Um, it starts out with the Panthers getting a very quick power play. Keandre Miller is called for cross-checking Sam Reinhart, 138. And a lot of the times on these Keandre mistakes, whether they be penalties or they be turnovers, they seem to end up in goals for the opposition. And that's exactly what happened. Sam Reinhart scores his 38th goal of the season from Sam Bennett and Evan Rodriguez at 222. And Reinhart just ends up in too good of a position where there's a little bit of a puck battle in the corner. The Panthers dig it out. And JT Miller is kind of the only one that's in the vicinity at the time. And Reinhart takes a shot that goes through Quick. It's one that Quick wants to have back, goes through 5-hole. And it's Sam Reinhart, and he wouldn't be done there. And Sam Reinhart, not only is he one of the best goal scorers in the league, it just seems like, whether it's with Buffalo or with the Panthers, he seems to score a lot of goals against the Rangers over the years, and some big ones too. Then at 6:30, Rasmus Asplund is called for boarding Adam Fox. The Panthers do kill that one off, and it was just so you know, it was the same Ranger power play crew, Unit 1 and Unit 2, but the Rangers do tie it up. A bad icing by Florida just after that power play had expired. There was a Panther that cleared it out. He had other options, he didn't need to, and off this, the Rangers win the faceoff. It's Uso Parson that wins it, and it's a goal from Matt Rempe, who is definitely one of the standouts of this game. He scores his third goal of the season, assisted by Keandre Miller and Parsonen. And so for some reason in this moment, I guess it makes sense. I guess it was a post-power play thing. So I'm kind of answering my own question as to why this was the trio with Cooley on uh, and Parson. So normally this would have included Lafreniere with Cooley and Parson, but it's Rempe that's on because Lafreniere was just with the second unit in the power play, and Parson wins back the draw. Keandre Miller takes the shot, Bobrovsky can't handle it, and Rempe just basically puts it in without much resistance to tie the game up at 1. So we go to the second period, and look, the Rangers, they held their own in this game, right? It wasn't as if they were getting dominated. This was nothing like, for example, at the Carolina game where there were just stretches of time when it was just pretty embarrassing. They were in it the whole way. Florida wasn't playing with that intensity that we're accustomed to. But you look at this game, and in some ways, um, not too dissimilar from the Rangers game at Florida on December 30th. And around that time was when the Rangers were, I guess, were kind of breaking out of their slump. I mean, it was kind of at the heights of it then. But Florida in that game, they were up 2 as well, and the Rangers scored, a couple. I'm kinda jumping ahead a little bit, but I wanted to look back. They scored 2 goals to tie it up in that game right around the same time as this one. The difference one there was that Florida then scored late in the second to take a 3-2 lead. The Rangers actually tied it again in the third, so there was a lot of that almost happened there with the multi-goal deficit comeback win, but ultimately Florida would end up winning that game in regulation by a score of 5-3. So, we go to the second period. And at 1:39, Gustav Forsling is called for delay game. But again, the Rangers power play does not score. They were 0 for 2 on the night. And then not too far after the Panthers kill it off, they score. This was off a faceoff win. This Verhaeghe goal, his 20th goal of the season from Forsling and Barkov, pretty similar to the Rempe goal. Barkov with a clean win against Vincent Trocheck. Forsling takes a shot, goes off a quick, and then it bounces off the leg of Verhaeghe, but I think Adam Fox was in the vicinity and goes in for the Panthers to take a 2-1 lead. And then at 13:54, Sam Reinhart scores again. Second of the night, 39th of the season from Barkov and Seth Jones to give the Panthers a 3-1 lead. And this one was just a really poor job by the Rangers that were on the ice. Keandre Miller, I think, was the first one that lost possession. And it just becomes a scrambly play in the Rangers zone with the forwards at that time being Kreider, Zibanejad, and Brodzinski. And Kreider does kind of a quick giveaway where he, gains possession of it quickly and gives it right to the Panther defenseman, Seth Jones. And it is Seth Jones who finds Alexander Barkov, who then finds Sam Reinhart in the slot, who beats Keandre Miller and scores past Jonathan Quick to give the Panthers a 3-1 lead. And so at that point, based on how the Rangers have done all season, easy to think that they would lose this game. But of course, the first game after they're eliminated is the time they decide that they are going to have a comeback. And it starts at 15:55. So about 2 minutes after the Reinhart goal, Uso Parson scores his 6th goal of the season from Keandre Miller and Will Cooley. So at that point, it's 2 points for Parson, 2 points for Keandre Miller. And this was a play that the Rangers win the battle uh, in the Florida zone in the corner. Cooley ends up with the puck, finds Keandre Miller towards the point, and he finds an open Parson who just tips it in past Bobrovsky as the Panther defenseman lost Parson. And so the Rangers cut it down to 3-2. And then about a minute and a half later, JT Miller ties it up, his 22nd goal of the season from Zibanejad and Kreider. And actually, Matthew Robertson, if you were to give another assist, obviously that's not how it works. Matthew Robertson would have gotten it. A little bit of a line change going on for the Panthers, and it wasn't really a great pass by Kreider, but it worked out. As one of the Panthers' defense, I believe it was Megna, was way too aggressive, and it kind of ends up in a little bit of a sort of 2-on-1 situation. Zibanejad goes with sort of a fake shot, leg up play, and it kind of, Seth Jones kind of bites on him a little bit, and JT Miller is able to just easily receive the pass and score past Bobrovsky to tie it up at 3. So that's a pretty big accomplishment in and of itself. But again, we have seen that at times this year where it's not as if the Rangers haven't tied the game up after trailing by 2 goals. They haven't won any. In the third period, it looks as if, okay, here we go. The Panthers are going to get something going because Matt Rempe trips Thomas Nosek at 2:44. And Matt Rempe, and he was looking great in this game, and he has been one of the bright spots this season. He needs to cut down on the penalties, and, again, there can be some ref blaming, but I think a lot goes to Rempe as well. He puts himself in these positions, and also with Rempe, there's a lot of defense. There's a lot of turnovers in his own zone. So it's not without his faults in his game. However, really, he has taken a major step from last season, where I feel like in a lot of ways, the praise he got was not that it wasn't deserved. He's a hardworking player, but I really feel like he worked on his game and has become a much better skater. Is someone that you can kind of rely upon in like a legitimate fourth line role. And whoever he's with, right? Obviously, he was with Edstrom on his other wing for a lot of the season. His fourth line center was Sam Carrick a lot, but also it's been Johnny Brodzinski as well. And it just seems like that whoever is with Rempe, typically Brodzinski or Carrick lately, that line seems to be effective. And with Chris Kreider on it as well, it still was good. And so Rempe takes that penalty, but it's a Florida Panther turnover that allows the Rangers to take the lead. Vincent Trocheck, the former Panther, scores his 25th goal of the season from JT Miller, and the Rangers score a lot of short-ended goals. I believe they lead the lead in that category. I want to say with maybe 15 or 16. The number is high. So, even though the penalty kill hasn't been as good lately as far as allowing goals, they still definitely provide offense, sometimes better than, on the power play. And it was a situation where really the Rangers, Miller and Trocheck, should have been caught up ice. The Panthers would have had a 4-on-2 on their hands, but they turn it over. I think it was a combination of maybe Boquist and maybe Sam Bennett. And it ends up in a play where JT Miller makes a nice backhand to Vincent Trocheck, and Bobrovsky has to go from left to right, and he's just unable to do so in time as Trocheck scores to make it 4-3. And then the Rangers they played a pretty good third period. I think under different circumstances, you would have seen a little bit more of a push for the Panthers. Not to say there weren't some opportunities, but the Rangers put this game on ice at 16:31 of the third. Johnny Brodzinski scores his 12th goal of the season from Kreider and Rempe. So, in essence, now obviously it was a little bit different, but I guess Rempe was kind of the factor on both goals, because I guess that the Rempe first goal was with Parsonen and Cooley, so it's a little bit different. But this is the fourth line, as it was drawn up to be, that scores the goal. And Carson Soucy kind of flips it towards the neutral zone. Rempe takes the puck, in the direction of Dmitry Kulikov and just barrels towards the net. And the puck is loose, and Chris Kreider, sort of behind the net, makes a little backhand pass to Brodzinski in front for the goal. It was a nice goal to give the Rangers a 5-3 lead, and that was your final score. So, again, pretty frustrating, the fact that this is something you were looking for all year. A very embarrassing statistic, the fact that they had not, for one time, won a game when trailing by 2 goals, and now they do it in the first game that did not mean anything. And it is a rare win against a playoff team. And again, there's so many caveats to this. This is not the full Panthers squad. Even though they did have, a lot of their stars were in there for sure. The Panthers were favored in this game. The Panthers did have some incentive to move up to that number 2 spot in the Atlantic Division, but the Rangers do get the win. And now there's one game to go. And like I said, it's draft positioning, someone on the line. I'll be able to give a better opinion after the Lightning game as far as where they land. If you finish in the top 11, it allows you with the chance to move up to 1. The most you move up is 10 spots via the lottery. So that's a little bit of a factor as well. So in other words, if they finish 12th or 13th, that's an impossibility. And the good thing is the lottery happens before the Rangers before assuming it's Chris Drury, makes a decision. They'll know what happens in the lottery first. So obviously the Rangers will up in the lottery. It's a no-brainer. You're keeping the pick and you're losing next year's. But we'll see, if they even have a chance to move up. That's going to be determined based on that last game and the remaining days of this season. But in the last road game of the year, the Rangers do the impossible. They come back from a multi-goal deficit to beat the Florida Panthers 5-3, and they will get ready for their last game of the season. It will be at Madison Square Garden against the Tampa Bay Lightning.